argument is a real big part of Jewish culture. And it's even built into our Passover ceremony, the 4 questions. You're supposed to have the most rebellious kid, youngest, ask in the most disrespectful tone, WTF? Why are we celebrating this holiday?
Welcome to the Single World News Show. Today we have Joel Bellenson, the serial entrepreneur and a great innovator. And we are on the second part of the topic where we discuss about the very contentious issue, very hotly debated issue in the world today about Israel war in the Gaza Strip region. And
I thought we were going to talk about when I'd grow my hair back. Okay, we can talk about this.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So I wanted to start with, we have this war which started after the most horrific incident of the 7th October, and when some people were celebrating just the day after Yom Kippur. Would love to, know your thought as, being from one of the oldest families of Israel. Would love to know your thoughts on this war. When do you think,
Well, mine are very unique. I was raised to be a normal Zionist. I went to Jewish summer camps, socialist summer camps, where we basically had our own kibbutzim, and everybody would take turns doing job rotation, agricultural, cooking, all that stuff, and studying the Torah and debating about the ethical, logical meaning. So it's kind of like a combination yeshiva, kibbutzim, and it just my hometown just happened to have American Jewish University based there. And so they had a summer camp that I attended every year from, must have been 8 years old till 22. And my dad was the camp doctor. So that was like a real part of my formative years. And yet, when I went off, not to Harvard, but when I went off to Stanford, that was the year of the war with Lebanon in 82, 83. And it was also the time when the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa was getting more intense. So I became politicized, and I was critical of Israel. Some of the same stuff some of the Jewish anti-Zionists say today, I was saying back in 82, 83, to be perfectly honest and to confess my childish. I'm not going to. Anyways, it was driven by good things, driven by a sense of responsibility to try to make the world a better place and to not continue the spiral of hatred that killed so much of my family in Europe, and to extend the spirit of never again and say, all right, I don't want to be part of causing pain to anyone else either. So I was appointed president of Hillel, the Jewish organization, by the rabbi without an election, because there's no way I would have been elected. At that time, I was really close with the Black community, Latino community, Asian, LGBT, and I was willing to criticize Israel. And I called for 2 states, which in 1982 was quite radical for a Jewish person to do that. And I did. And I was, heavily attacked, as one would expect. And I had, in parallel, I'll tell an interesting side vignette. My same program of international relations a year ahead of me was a guy named Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl also went to the same Jewish summer camp as I did, Camp Alanim. And we both ended up at Stanford, both in international relations. And, our social network continues to this day. He's famous for being the first person beheaded by Al-Qaeda in 2003. You remember where they televised his confession that he was a Jew and they beheaded him on television? So it's interesting. I mean, I when I think about when I started becoming critical of Israel And I think that was when I first met Danny, and we were discussing our feelings about the whole situation, and we both were torn about it. And I think that's what led to his death, incidentally, because he was curious to learn more about Al Qaeda. We decided, look, let's not accept whatever stereotypes were being given in the media or by our Jewish peers, and let's find out the truth ourselves, and let's give the benefit of the doubt to people. And I think that's how all of us have operated for a long time. And I got arrested even supporting Palestinian cause, 1989, and it got in every Jewish newspaper in America, and it humiliated my father. He disowned me, and I had learned Arabic, and I hung out in those circles of pro-PLO, and whether on the Jewish side or the Muslim side. So, the Noam Chomsky, Edward Said, Elon Pop, Norman Finkelstein. I had met all of these people personally when they came and spoke at Stanford. I had met representatives of the Popular Front, which is kind of the Marxist version of the PLO. I had met Hamas people, Hezbollah people. They would come and speak, their reps, and I wanted to learn what they stood for. And I built up a gigantic library. In fact, I had been doing that since '78. When I was a teenager, our father and mother would take us downtown to Los Angeles to the Museum of Science and Industry or Natural History. Usually outside of these museums, there were Iranians who were protesting against the Shah. And so they came from many different political perspectives, from socialist to communist to, various intensities of Islam. And I just gathered pamphlets like a Cookie Monster. It's like, feed me. And I got tapes of Khomeini. I wanted to hear what he was saying. And I was at the same time studying European history. And I started wondering, are they going through something like the Protestant Reformation, and this is Martin Luther, and it's some sort of pious movement against urban absentee landlords and money lenders, and basically I tried to have sympathy for it and to see its place in European evolution. And so we even had 2 Iranian Jews move in with our family. In 1979, 1980, my parents felt it was our duty to help the Jews in Iran that were fleeing the situation there. And so a brother and sister moved in with me. They became my new brother and sister. And but it was very complicated because by day I'd have to protect them from Americans wanting to be violent or mean to them because they were Iranian, not realizing that they were Jews,
right?
I mean, because they're dark skinned, etc. Right? But Jews come in all colors, so I had to protect them at school. And then I get home, and it turned out these kids must have been really spoiled, and they treated my mom and sisters like they were their house slaves. And so it was really a weird experience, and to deal with that duality, having to defend them by day and at night dealing with them being abusive and entitled towards us. And that didn't last very long. Less than a year, I think we found out they had a brother who was actually quite wealthy, diamond and gold dealer in downtown Los Angeles. And we said, go live with your wealthy brother. We can't handle you. But I've always been caught in these positions, where I'm trying to see both sides of it and be fair, and then realizing that life just isn't fair. Right. And a lot of times you can try to defer the choice and base it on wishful thinking and hopes and dreams. And I think I did that for 30 years. I hoped things would fit my idea of what they should be, instead of accepting what they really are, whether I can do anything about it or not. So that's been a big part of my journey in life, especially the last 17 years or so, even since I left America. So 22 years now, discovering that I can't change the world the way I think it should be. The world's going to unfold the way it's going to unfold, with or without me. I still want to express myself, and I get angry about how things go. I won't deny it. I'm not some perfect, person that can rise above everything. But I've tried. I've really tried hard, and I paid for it. I was way out in front. So whenever you hear about Jews that are protesting against Israel, that was me 30 something, almost, well, in the 80s. So it would have been 40 years ago. And I know what they're thinking. I know the arguments, and I know kind of there's big gaps of knowledge of history that drive a lot of this, and a lot of wishful thinking. And on the Jewish side, and a lot of the people who don't like Jews love to just throw out accusations or negatives, even knowing it won't stick, just so they can try to dirty you. So for them, it's kind of a game. A lot of people who are not part of the region, it's like a sporting event, for them, to cheer for a team or not. But, this is real people involved. And it is the way it is. It's tragedy. There's no way around this. This is a tragedy for everyone.
There is a parallel here. See, what we see nowadays is rising Hindu phobia. So you throw accusation against people, knowing it will be. It is parallel. But so in that,
unfortunately, what I did learn when I studied Islam is that they make big room for that behavior. They call it taqiyya. Yes. Where they can spread any lie they want in the name of jihad, and they can justify lying on truces or ceasefires or whatever, anything in the cause. So if you believe by any means necessary, which we all kind of got from Malcolm X in the American scenario, and obviously he came out of Nation of Islam, which is not truly Islam at all, but nonetheless, this idea of by any means necessary, everybody goes there eventually. In a real existential genocidal crisis, everybody eventually throws all their principles out the window, and it becomes just whose hypocrisy is least tolerable, because everybody becomes a hypocrite. I think I've had to, just really confront that everybody's a hypocrite, and it's just whose hypocrisy is more intolerable. And if you're not part of it, lucky you. You can cheer it on as if it's a sports team. If you are part of it, well, we're the pawns caught in the middle. And I think both the Palestinians and the Jewish people are both pawns caught in the middle. They have been caught in the middle by Arab and European governments and American who use them. And they have their agendas, right? These countries destabilize regimes to get better deals for oil or gas. And they're constantly doing this. And different companies are trying to get control over different governments. And that's the crude reality of it. I mean, even when there's a justifiable anger that America was involved in removing Mossadegh from Iran. And you dig deeper, you find out it was a battle between British and American oil interests. Ugly, incredibly banal, but and then yet his alliance with the Soviet Union. So choosing to be a socialist, choosing then to ally with the Soviet Union, when people felt that socialism would be the way to escape poverty, then the guy who wanted to be on the side of the poor guy would say he was a socialist. And that's happened everywhere, right? And so I went through my socialist and Marxist phase too, and studied it like it was the Talmud. I mean, I read the collected works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky, Mao Zedong, all of them. Every single book I had. You may have seen in my old place.
Yeah.
I had a huge library of leather-bound hardback of every one of the original Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Trotskyite, Stalinist books, and I had memorized them, and I could engage in almost biblical level discussions and quoting chapter and verse about all this stuff, and motivated by this sense of support for the working man. Now, as we've learned, it doesn't seem like socialism works out so great for the working man or anyone. But that was the hope. That was the religion then. So that's spread throughout the world. I think most countries in the global south have very large socialist inclinations. India did. Uganda's leaders here, they were Marxists originally as well. So I think a lot of the global south has a Marxist vibe, or at least used to, until it was kind of, we learned that it really didn't lead anywhere and positive. And the person who's usually pushing it is kind of, if they are honest with themselves, they'll realize they believe in a certain philosophy that's not Marxism. What they truly believe in is enlightened despotism. And they think that they'll be the ones in charge. And if they were the ones in charge, their enlightened values would make sure nobody would get exploited. But then along the way, you get to the by any means necessary. And so, whether it's the Islamic taqiyya or what have you in the socialist thing, people can justify doing unspeakable things to each other. And it's because of a belief. And that belief could be religious, it could be socioeconomic or political economy theory. It could be, you name the reason. People have their intensities, right? And something that they believe is true, that they believe will bring goodness to the world, the Messiah or whatever. And that's how humans are. And I've come to accept that. Everybody's got their own thing that they've got going. Everybody's on a mission of some sort. You're lucky they're honest with themselves, and that they admit they're on a mission, and they admit that it's a hypothesis, and they're hoping that what they believe in is true and useful, and that they're one day going to hold themselves to account if it's not. And are they capable of changing and saying, this is what I used to believe. No, I don't believe that anymore. I'm not quite sure what's right. I'm trying to make sense out of it all. I'm also learning I don't matter as much as I thought. And I really just should be figuring out how I'm going to survive all this chaos. And, how can I guess what might happen? And you could spend forever on that too, trying to predict the future. But, and it's just, as you get older, you end up discovering, that you're not as impactful as you thought you were, and all these, and yet, look at me. I got to dream up companies that created new industries. True. So if anyone should have a sense of being able to have an impact, it would be someone like me. And yet I've had to learn how I can't. And I used to dream of Palazreal. I came up with this name of combining it. I made a flag with the DNA double helix showing how we were genetically related, and somehow calling for a one state. I told you I supported two states, right, from like 82 to 86. By 1986, I concluded that two states wouldn't work. That just was incompatible with both sides' views. And, if you read, I read the PLO and Hamas charter when it came out in 88, and very clear there was just no room for coexistence. But I was, all right, so what could be a one state? And, I had also dreamed of, I guess, something similar to the Abraham Accords, that someday, one day, Israel will be welcomed into it like a United States of the Middle East. And that we could all just be together. And but of course, again, very naive, and believing in these ideas that democracy and free markets would eventually win everywhere. This is like the Francis Fukuyama era, right? The end of history. And I think that contaminated my thinking, that I didn't want to face up to that Sharia is what it is. And Islam's views of Jews and Christians and Hindus and Sikhs and many other people is so deeply intolerant. They really believe their beliefs supersede everything that humanity ever thought before Muhammad and whatever of the latest hadiths. And we see that behavior with them building on top of holy sites everywhere, or blowing up the Buddhist statues in Bamidyan, or obviously the Western Wall in Israel, or Ayodhya in India. General attitude of erasing whatever came before. There's a word for it, I forgot, in Arabic, and it's a policy of erasure. So this is deeply embedded into Islam, unfortunately. And there's another phrase that describes that anywhere Islam has ever ruled, it has a right to rule forever. And so basically you can never, in God's good graces, rebel against having been a Muslim country. And therefore you are forever supposed to be, in that religion because your land once was. And so, obviously India fought hard to become free of the Mughal Empire, and the Spanish, they hurt the Jews, but their Reconquista against the Muslims, it took them 800 years to retake their country. And so they went through, everybody denies that anything ever happened, as if it was all a big parade of candy and flowers, but that somehow the history is not told correctly. It is in the Quran. The Quran's boldly honest about the conquests, but in the popular knowledge, somehow that's not there. It's like, have you ever read the Quran? It's really clear about its conquests and why. So it's like, that's their thing. Now there are reformist Muslim movements going on. MBS in Saudi Arabia wants to reform Islam. And I've met numerous Ugandan Muslims that have, views that deviate from conventional Islam. So it's happening. Maybe it'll be ironic that Iran probably becomes the place of either a reform of Islam or almost an anti-Islamic movement. We see that with the younger people. They are not seeing themselves as Muslim. They see themselves as secular, or they're reverting to Zoroastrianism, or just curious. There's a time of curiosity. So with this current war, seen in the context of all of this, Israel and the Palestinians have had numerous attempts at trying to divide the land. And this goes back to, 1947, when there was a plan laid out by the UN, or even long before that, the British with the Balfour Declaration, or the League of Nations with the San Remo Declaration in 1920, which said that the Jews were on the west side of the Jordan and the Muslims on the right. And that was the San Remo Agreement. So that those have been sitting there. And then after 1947, when the UN laid out the plan, the Jews accepted it and the Muslims did not, or the Arabs did not. At that point, there were more Christians there. There might have even been 10% Christians in some parts of Palestine. Now there's very, very little, which tells you something else. In fact, Christians are driving out, at least in
Yeah, I saw this graph of all these Middle East countries where there was a significant proportion of the Jews, and now they have been reduced to almost nothing. If you see in around India, like in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, the population of non-Islamic religion has been reduced to almost negligible proportion, even though during partition it was a very healthy proportion, like 10-14% of the population. So it seems to be the same structure with any Islamic ruled countries around the world, be it Indonesia, be it Pakistan, or be it in the Middle East.
And there's reasons for it. Not all of it is just that Islam is, so intolerant, although that's a big part of it. I think there's something limiting Muslim countries from being able to generate wealth and hold on to wealth. So even though they've had all this oil and gas for a century, they're incredibly poor. And so it's like there's something in. The British had this, versus the Irish. The British had the eldest son inherit everything, primogeniture, versus the Irish, which did equal inheritance. So that made it so that capital got fragmented. So the family wealth kept on getting divided with each generation. And if your capital gets smaller and smaller, it's hard to do big things. So that could be something like that in Islamic culture, where it's inheritance keeps on subdividing capital to levels where it can't reach critical mass. And obviously we know that there's really different dynamics, shall we say, between men and women than what is considered acceptable and useful in, let's say, the Western world. So, not leveraging women beyond the household has consequences. Now, good and bad. Right? Maybe they have more time with the kids to educate them. Working outside of the house can, really put a strain on a family. And the fact that two people, both members of a couple have to work is actually hard. I was lucky my mother stayed home for a while for me. But, so anyways, I don't know what's the right culture, but they are what they are. Certain cultures seem to be more successful. I think I felt very guilty about Jewish success and Jewish survival.
Why is
Why did I feel guilty? Well, when you're around working class people, my town I grew up in was not wealthy. My father was a doctor, and a doctor's skills were much more valuable than maybe someone who was a construction worker or something like that, right? And so I think I felt guilty, and I was also more educated than all the other kids in school.
Sorry to interrupt, but he worked hard to become a doctor, and he worked hard to get that skill, and he should get benefited accordingly. What is wrong with that picture?
I think I felt, and a lot of Jews suffer from this. This is why so many of us become socialists. We feel guilty about our success. And
Success.
now, aside from hard work, I would say our big advantage is historic. And our historic advantage is that we've had universal literacy longer than any other culture. Other cultures had literacy for the priests from some tiny narrow caste, right? I'm sure Hindu culture had a tiny caste that were literate, obviously, and the average person wasn't. But for Jews, it's been a mandate for thousands of years that everybody had to be literate, and you had to be able to argue. Argument is a real big part of Jewish culture, and it's even built into our Passover ceremony. The 4 questions. You're supposed to have the most rebellious kid, youngest, ask in the most disrespectful tone, WTF? Why are we celebrating this holiday? So the 4 questions in the way, anyway, so just, attacking the elders of why the hell are we doing this? And so it's built into the culture that the elders have to respond. that it's okay for the young to hold the elders to account and to dare to ask questions. And so that's a powerful part of the culture, I think.
There is one thing I want to add. In Hindu culture, it's not just the Brahmins, others were educated too. So if you see any Hindu in US, you will find couple of things. They have a great stress on education. And second, every one of them can be very argumentative, even though they have a soft business by nature. So yes, argumentation, vichar is an intrinsic part of our culture, and you could challenge. The only thing is, though, it is normally expected that we will respect the elders, but doesn't mean that we wouldn't question. So, there are a lot of similarities in that,
Oh, definitely.
questions.
Definitely. I mean, that's why I think, and there's similarities that both cultures have struggled against Islam, and both cultures came long before Islam, and thousands of years. I don't think, probably if your average viewer is, I don't know if they're in the West or they're in India, Indians know how old their culture is, but I don't think Westerners do. And Westerners don't even know how old Jewish culture is. And so, I get asked by Christians all the time why I don't believe in Jesus. And I'm like, well, that's kind of not part of Judaism, right? Jesus came along thousands of years after Judaism started. Thousands.
And Jesus
and they're like, Jesus was a Jew, and the Last Supper was Passover dinner. And so it's like, I consider him my great to the 150th power, or no, 100th power uncle, especially since I'm Levite, I'm House of David. So if in fact he existed, he would be my great to the 100th power uncle, great Uncle Jesus. So that's just how I...
Big question though, did he really exist, the Jesus of Nazareth?
Who knows? I mean, when you read Josephus, who is one of the only living historians who wrote about that period of time, he was also Jewish. He talks about numerous people that were claiming to be the Christ. So we've had a lot of Jews who have the Messiah syndrome, that we think we're going to save the world, right? Whether it's Jesus or Karl Marx, we seem to have this compulsion that we're going to be the saviors of humanity, and that periodically breaks out into something crazy. We've had numerous. This is probably why Judaism has had, in a way, it's been able to keep fresh with numerous reformations, small tweaks, absorptions of other cultures as we were chased around the planet. And of course, now coming back to Israel, there are so many different flavors of Jews that they have to almost negotiate how are they going to integrate all this. And Jews from everywhere, the Spanish, because I'm a mix of Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Mizrahi, which are from the Arab and Muslim countries. We may have Yemeni blood. And actually, you realize, by the way, North Yemen, where the Houthis are, used to be Jewish. It was a Jewish territory. It was a Jewish kingdom. And then they killed them all. So I don't know why. I don't know the details. But anyways, so as you mentioned, though, in relatively modern times, starting when Israel got formed, formally in 48, there was a mass expulsion of Jews from Muslim countries. I think 800,000 or 900,000 Jews were kicked out from Morocco all the way across Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Oman, Iraq. Huge amounts in Iraq, by the way. I think like some enormous number, like half of or a third of the city of Basra was Jewish, and like half of Baghdad, which is fascinating, right? I knew we had our Babylonian exile, and we went and we had our Assyrian exile. So there's Syrian Jews, Lebanese Jews. All of these had to run away and go to Israel. So actually, even though people focus on the European Jews that came starting in the 1880s, of course, there were Jews that had been there for a long time. My family, has a few branches that were in Jerusalem that we know of in the 1500s. So somehow they survived the Crusades and they held on being in Jerusalem. But the big waves started, coming in the 1880s, and they came from Russia. And so people often just focus on those waves and then the post-German Holocaust waves. And but they ignore that actually today, more than half of all Israeli Jews are descendants from Muslim countries.
Oh.
And so the Mizrahi are the majority and of Jews. And then 20% of Israeli citizens are Muslim or Christian or Druze. So, although very small percentages, but mostly that 20+% is Muslim. So, it's when people their image of Israel as if it was created by European settlers kind of doesn't fit most of the data, but it's convenient because a lot of people feel, well, in the West they feel guilty about colonialism, and if the Jews can be defined as white, then we can be the scapegoat. And then that may be even true among people in the global South. It gives them some modern image of the colonialists that existed. And so the Jews as these monster colonial settlers helps give people some new outlet for their frustration about why their countries are not more successful. And they can just blame the evil Jews that, thwarted their ambitions, and look at what they're doing to the Palestinians. And so now we get into the modern times where no one wants to talk about every single time we've tried to divide the land and they keep on refusing. And so, and that numerous times. And so that doesn't get in the news. Somehow it's always conveniently forgotten. Every war waged, we get invaded, 6-Day War, 1973 Yom Kippur War. Each time we win, usually we're stopped from going further by the U.S. So actually people think that, the U.S. is helping us, and actually most of the time they're holding us back.
Right.
So it's ironic, they'll say, oh, we're puppets of the U.S. That's not how the Jews in Israel feel. We actually feel like that we're being blocked by the U.S. from being able to really do what we need to do. And each time one of these wars ends, we end up in a new cycle, and in effect, we have to keep on supporting an enemy who hates us so they can have a do-over. So we have to keep on giving them do-overs, even though we beat them each time, and they started each time. So they start the war, we beat them, and then we're the bad guys, and we have to give them a do-over. And it's just, after a while, it just seems absurd. And it's like, when I was on their side all the time, it suddenly came to me, it's like, the Jews are going to keep on kicking their ass because it's a more successful culture.
Right. And
they just have no hope. And the sooner they move on with their lives, the better. I mean, who are we to keep on encouraging them to fight Israel?
right.
They'll never win. They'll never win. It's like, what are we gaining out of forcing these poor people to have a ridiculous dream that just has no potential of ever occurring? And at some point, you got to be honest with yourself. And I confronted Norman Finkelstein on this, and he has himself confronted himself. Because he says, look, no self-respecting Jew is going to want a hate-filled armed neighbor next door. Right. Obviously. Yet he's been Jewish and advocating for this. And he admitted that he had been doing this so long now in his life, he had built his whole career around it and ruined so many other friendships that he had no other choice but to continue. He was just trapped now advocating for a plan that had no possibility. And so some of this is just having to get really real about the situation. Jews like to say, and this is, Golda Meir said it, is like, in the end, our secret weapon is we have nowhere else to go. Right. And as we're seeing with all the anger towards Jews in the Western world, it does feel like they are going to be pressured to leave those countries. I don't think Israel is their only choice. That's where I disagree. I think that there are pockets in the world that are still open to Jews. I think I founded a friendly pocket here in East Africa. I know India would be friendly. I think Southeast Asia would be friendly. So Israel's not the only choice, but you never know. I mean, that's generally we're welcome somewhere for a while.
India is the only country.
200 years?
Yeah, no, I'm saying India is the only country which never persecuted any Jews, and you were, always welcome here. And from very, very long
and I know that in my heart, that if for some reason things turned ugly here in East Africa, India might be where I'd go, or if Israel was calmed down, maybe I would go there. I don't know what I would do. It depends how old I am when all this would happen. I pray I don't ever live to see the day where I feel unwelcome here in East Africa. Right now I feel welcome. I know there's big debates about Israel, but I don't feel personal hatred towards me. Maybe I'm delusional and I'm not seeing it, but there is a sense of wariness that I've picked up. People are concerned. There is the sense that whatever horrible things that were done to the Jews on October 7th, and people are fuzzy on it, and a lot of them like to deny it or say that it was invented, but they have trouble wanting to face it. So there's there used to be Holocaust denial, now we have October 7th denial, and in general there's a denial of Jewish history. I think that's what we generally see, is denial of Jewish history. It's all just made up stuff. It's just something from the Bronze Age in some book that's irrelevant. And so it's there's a contempt among secularists. But it's not just secularists. I mean, Christians, they have a love-hate relationship with the Torah. It's like it existed, but there's a little bit of the Muslim attitude that what we have supersedes what came before. So Christians also have that, of supersession. And so in general, the idea that Judaism is this ancient, ridiculous thing and is very widespread all around the world in all kinds of ways. And people don't know much about us. And we don't usually talk about ourselves to the rest of the world. And I think that's one of our sins. We haven't been proud. I've been ashamed. I used to hide. I would feel ashamed of seeing the Israeli flag and the Hebrew language. And I grew up reading it, right? I was one of the fastest readers as a kid. And it actually helped me quite a bit to open my mind to different languages, to read right to left with different characters, and also being a musician. I think it gave me a lot of headspace for language. And at the same time, I was ashamed of it, always ashamed of it. Because I grew up as a tiny minority in my town, and very tiny. There were 3 Jews in my whole high school, or something pathetically small. This is out of thousands, and so we always, try to play one song for Hanukkah, somehow not make us feel so alone and isolated during Christmas time. But it was that type of token thing that. It could be worse, obviously.
I see a lot of parallels with our culture. So since Indian independence, our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, he was in his own words, he was an accidental Hindu. He felt more like a Muslim, he felt more like British, and claimed himself to be an accidental Hindu. He was very friendly with the wife of Lord Mountbatten, who ruled over India at that time, and so you can understand his culture. And then what happened was, for a long time, these Hindus were ashamed of telling that they are Hindus. They wanted to be deemed as a secular, in the image of Jawaharlal Nehru, and communism took a hold in Bengal and all that stuff. The problem is they also ignored the humongous amount of history, our culture. And there was a conflict between this historian who wanted to write the accurate history of India, But Jawaharlal Nehru and the then education minister Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad wanted to write a whitewashed history of India where all the Mughal atrocities are pushed under the carpet. So this, he's an honest man. He decided to, quit his charge of writing the history of India. So I think the best thing that has come here in the last 9-10 years since 2014 is there is a with Modi, yes, and we have regained ourselves. We have regained a part of our history and culture, a sense of being, a sense of belonging, a sense of pride. And so, if you look at the graph of India, it is growing phenomenally in the last 8-9 years. You look at the parameters, you look at the pure sheer numbers. You look at the, how much export we have increased, what is the GDP increase, what is the per capita GDP increase. So, but where the so-called secular Marxist cabal can fudge the stuff like happiness index, they will fudge. They will say Pakistan is happier than us, even though they cannot even afford to get, basic necessities like rice and flour, like extremely poor. The economy is on the verge of collapse and pretty much collapse.
Well, the tragedy of these Islamic cultures, having the power of both the very rich people and the religious leader who acts as the intermediary between you and God, then gives them this opportunity to keep the population very illiterate and ignorant and without critical thinking skills. And they've done that, right? They banned printing presses in the Muslim world for centuries. And then even when they do give people stuff to read, it's for reciting, and they don't breed a culture of critical thinking currently. There were different periods in Muslim history where brilliant people came out of North Africa and Persia. And maybe they would have come regardless of Islam, and maybe they came out despite Islam, but at least there were some very smart people at the same time in those places. Brilliant mathematicians and historians, and I studied all of them, Ibn Battuta and blah, blah, blah. Because he looked at the cyclicality of history, which is one of my big themes.
Look at the STEM, in all the US universities. Look at the professors of the STEM subjects. See how many of them are Jews, how many of them are Muslims. I think that will give you a very clear picture. And you can look also how many are Hindus. That will give you a very clear picture.
Well, even among, there are increasingly, I see surnames or names that are either Arab or Turkish or Persian. But then when you meet these people, as I've chased down many scientists to discuss papers and things, they've usually ended up being the secular ones. And often they were ones that grew up around Jews, actually. So it's interesting when I meet really smart Iraqis, Iranians, Lebanese, Egyptians, they actually had Jews in their family circle. So that actually helped to promote their curiosity and confidence in exploring things. And so that's an interesting thing people don't talk much about, is that that there has been a positive contribution of Jews to the good stuff that happens in Muslim countries. And I think Jewish women have had a profound impact on women in the Muslim world. I would imagine, from what I read, the Iranian women really have looked to the Jewish women as their role models. And of course, many Israelis are from Iranian families, right? There were hundreds of thousands of Iranian Jews that moved to Israel. So I think there's only like 30,000 left, maybe less. But there used to be very, very many, because there's just a huge history of interconnection between the Jewish and Persian people, which is what the Book of Esther addresses. And so it's a complicated situation we're in right now. Because even though ostensibly it's a war between Israel and seemingly Iran, it's not between the peoples as a whole. Now, maybe Gaza is different. The Gazan hatred is pretty broad. Not every Gazan hates the Jews, but a pretty high percentage. I've seen, actually, since the war, a lot less. They've actually become less. Well, I don't know how to measure the hatred. There's been polls like, do you support the massacre that happened on October 7th? And I think the percentage ranges from like 70 to 98% across the Arab world. And Gaza now has one of the lowest that supports the massacre, of course, because they've experienced what I know the whole world sees as just this intense reaction. And they think it's an overreaction. And from the Jewish perspective, that's not the case. I'll just say that. From our perspective, we're a very tiny people. There's only 15 million of us on the planet. There's 140 times as many Muslims as there are Jews.
True.
So killing, 1,200 of us and kidnapping and raping and beheading and maiming and baking and all this shit. It's just incredible the amount of hatred. I couldn't believe some of the videos I watched. I watched this guy with a garden hoe hacking and hacking and hacking away at the neck of some Thailand worker or Indian worker in Israel. And he was just, I couldn't believe, how can you hate a stranger to such a degree, to have such ferocity, to keep on trying to chop he was failing because he couldn't chop the guy's head off. It was just horrible to watch. It's so incredibly horrible. And I was like, wow, how do you have that type of anger? And how are we ever going to live together? Who have I been kidding?
I think that's a very fundamental question. There are a few things I want to ask you. But first of all, if a population, it doesn't matter which religion, which culture.
And by the way, some of my best friends here in Africa are Muslim, right? I have a Muslim accountant. I have a Muslim attorney. So it's like I have Muslims in my life. I've dated Muslim women here even. So it's like I have no hatred. And just the hatred towards me is just so intense when I hear it. It's like, whoa, where did that come from?
So you see, how can two cultures coexist? How can even the two-nation formula work when one culture is, or one group of people, to be more is hell-bent upon destroying the other group of people? How can there be a peaceful coexistence? I do not understand that.
Well, especially look at who this war involved. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the people who were killed were the best friends of the Gazans.
Yeah.
So the people in the kibbutz, these were the leftists, socialists. These are the ones that were bringing medicine to the Gazans or taking them to Israeli hospitals. The kids that got massacred at that festival was all about peace and coexistence. That's who was dancing there. These were leftist anti-war protesters, and they were the ones that got raped and killed. So it's been a 360-degree turn for the Jewish left in Israel, and it's starting to spread to America and Britain. They're slow because they're distant, and they can hold on to their utopianism like I used to have. Again, I'm guilty of all of this in my past, so I'm no self-righteousness here. I've tried to view it from each side, and maybe as you get older, you rebel against your younger self, and you go, wow, how could I have believed in that? And then you have to, so now I'm trying to cut myself some slack too. It's like, well, you're a good person. You want to see the best in people. You don't want to write off a whole group. You don't want to stereotype. It sucks. Feeling that way just sucks. I go to bed crying at night over how many people my side has killed. And I mean, when I look at the wreckage and I'm like, how the hell are we going to move forward? And it's like, and yet Lebanon is bombing and Yemen is attacking and Iraq and Syria and Iran and Turkey is threatening and Jordan saying the peace might break, and Egypt saying the peace might break. So it's like, well, we're going to have 500 million people, and we're going to have to just we have to destroy city after city? Like, is that what it takes to get people to finally just say, leave us alone? I mean, it's like, it shouldn't have to require this.
Right.
And and obviously it was done right before we were about to do a deal with Saudi Arabia,
yes,
where we finally were going to have a peace relationship with them. And this was done to sabotage that. I still feel it will eventually happen. The Saudis do too. I've talked to people high up in Saudi Arabia. They really want it. Their population on average hates us too. So we shouldn't kid ourselves. Even if the governments want to make peace with us, the vast majority of the populations of our alleged friends who have treaties, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Bahrain, Sudan, potentially, or UAE. Actually, UAE is the highest percentage that doesn't hate us, but still not great. Anyways, but we're even when the leaders are willing to be pragmatic and make a deal with us, their people don't like us, and a lot of it's they've been, training their people to hate us for decades and centuries. And it's in the Quran to see us as subhuman, right? The Quran refers to us as the sons of pigs and apes. And that's not, if that's what I am. I'm a son of a pig and ape, I guess, to the Muslims. But I wish they didn't have to be like that. I mean, Judaism came 2,500 years before Islam, so none of our books say anything about them at all, let alone anything cruel or dehumanizing. There's nothing in Judaism that has any negativity towards Muslims. So it's really intense when you see how it's baked into the Quran. It's worse even in the Hadiths, but it's bad enough in the Quran. And so when people have been raised to dehumanize the other, it is a form of, it's a tired phrase. I hate bringing up the N word, the Nazi word, because people use it just too easily. And I get, called a Zio-Nazi. And I'm like, this is before the war. I was getting abused on Twitter that I'm a Zio-Nazi, I'm an apartheidist, I'm a racist, Well, I spent my entire college life fighting apartheid in South Africa. At the time, I was married to a Ugandan woman, raising her kids as her siblings as my family. And, my life, everybody in my life is black. Everybody who matters to me is black. So is that I'm a racist? I don't know. Maybe, that I have a different definition. So, but they would call me everything. And after a while, you get immune. It's like, all right, you can call me any name you want. What are you going to do when I actually, or when my people do something really harsh? You've called us Nazis. No. You've kind of used up your rhetorical ammunition during a time of peace and mercy. And, when you call us a Nazi times a billion, okay. Whatever nasty names you want to use, it's not going to change what's going to happen. And I got exposed to this heavily on Twitter. I attracted a lot of jihadis, and they would give me death threats every day. I'd get like a dozen of them. They put my face with a sniper scope on it, and then they would use just an endless stream of cocksucking, motherfucking, blah, 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 Jewish this, and Zionist that. And so I'd get like 24 of those every day. And I learned to try to become immune to it, not take it too personally, and pray that someone really isn't out to kill me, but they just wanted somebody to attack, and I was there. So it made me realize just how close we were to a crisis, and I could feel it building on Twitter. And then when it happened, no surprise at all. And then, of course, I got banned from Twitter 2 days after the war began. Oh yeah, I'm still suspended. They won't reinstate me.
Oh.
The post I wrote that they used as their justification was when I asked about the question of proportionality. I go, how do we define proportionality? If we do it by per capita of the planet, then what are you saying, that we should kill 140 Muslims for every Jew who's killed? And if we go beyond 140, that would be disproportional. So 1,000 would be disproportionate, but under, it's like, how do we? So even the fact that I was trying to ask this question, I guess, was seen as some sort of incitement.
I thought Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist.
That's what I thought. Anyway, so what was my other citation was after the war began and Netanyahu told people in northern Gaza to relocate, and I confronted one of these non-Jew, non-Muslim people who is an activist in Gaza. There's, you know the type. Yeah. They're usually Americans or Brits that are self-righteous college students, right, that, they've taken the side of the Gazans. And so this guy had posted this, tragic picture of a mother and her child and, worrying and suffering. And I'm like, that's poor parenting. What type of parent stays in a place when they've been warned that they should vacate it by a military? It's like, why would you put your child in harm's way? A massive army, mad as hell, is about to respond, and they've warned you. They've given you weeks of warning, right? There's like 3 weeks of warning.
Definitely, that is a horrible parenting.
With the tanks sitting there, and then they sent leaflets, they made phone calls, and sent text messages, knocks on the door. And it's like, what kind of a lousy parent stays and has their child stay in a place of danger when, what do they think, that they're going to prove something? What are they going to prove? You're going to die. This is, one of the most powerful armies in the world. You've done the most horrible thing to the Jewish people since the Germans killed them in the gas chambers. And they're mad as hell. And there is nothing on earth that can stop the Jewish people. America can't even stop the Jewish people. No one can. When we're this mad, we have so much anger, so much trauma that we've sublimated over the centuries. Then you throw in the rapes. Oh my God, it just triggers so much historic trauma of the Jewish women being raped throughout history. And so it's like, for the rest of the world, it's like, it's 1,200. Maybe it's just like, it's not worth noticing. It's not as big as some earthquakes or whatever, but we're really tiny people. And, you kill that many. It would be like 50 9/11s or something like that. And because of our history, we are primed to respond. We swore to ourselves as children that we would not go meekly into gas chambers and oppression again. And so when these people did all their brutality, it was like, whoa, it's happened. Oh my God. This wasn't supposed to happen. Israel's not the place this would happen. It would happen elsewhere. And Israel is supposed to be our safe place. Right. And so I don't think the world realizes just the psychological re-traumatization that has been triggered, and it's now unstoppable. The younger generation of Jews is getting more radical by the moment, and more solidified. We were having so many fights that was making me sick before the war. We were having basically a Jewish civil war on the streets of Israel, and it was impacting everywhere. It was all around the world that Jews on the left and the right were fighting. The religious versus the secular, the socialist versus the libertarian, the globalist versus the particularist, and all of our divisions. And we have many. You could chop us up probably into 50 psychographics. But, we were all at war. And it was so horrible. I remember getting so sick on Yom Kippur when atheist Jews went and bullied this poor Mizrahi Jew, of Muslim country background,
Right.
because he was praying in public,
Oh.
and they were like, "You people!" These were the seculars, right? And the atheists, because they're mad at the religious because the religious don't generally serve in the army, and their workforce participation rates are lower
Okay.
among the men. The women are the same, by the way. The men actually have jumped up dramatically, and a whole bunch of hardcore religious Jews joined the army in this war. And so it's like everything's now changed. But on the streets that day, they were filled with the stereotype, and they picked on this kid. And he said, "What are you talking about? This is the holiest day of the year for Jews. I'm praying this one day. Normally, I'm out with you protesting. I've been out with you protesting against Netanyahu. And now I'm you people." And he's like, and so it just made me so sick, because I felt so guilty, because I used to be that atheist bully, that Jewish atheist bully, who made me feel so awful about all the people I hurt in that way. And we're always hurting people, whether we mean to or not. And, but that really hit me hard. And then in some strange way, when Hamas attacked, obviously it was just shocked, but at the same time not, because a lot of the jihadi kids who wrote to me, they gave me scenarios that they were going to fly over the fence, they were going to dig under it, they would blow it up, they would drive over it with ATVs. So they previewed all of the things that ended up happening. And we're coming, and we're going to rape your sisters and mothers and nieces and blah 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 blah. They talk much. It's funny, and I get banned from Twitter, so it's like, but they were explicit. They did not hold back. They were hoping to scare me with all of it, which was disturbing, but I didn't know what to do to change. I am who I am. You think my forehead's too big, my nose is too big, and you want to kill me? Okay, fine. So anyways, all of this stuff is now, it's had an impact. I've lost many friends. It's hard to deal with people, and in some ways, well, I'm not going to say that they're the only ones at fault. In some cases, it was after the event, I had people sending me clips that was showing how awful the Palestinians had been treated, and therefore this war was justified.
How can
which was
killing of 1,800 innocent people? I don't see any form of justification. I have actually one question, which has been bothering me, and you will probably have much more insights on it. Immediately after this, there are two things which bothers me. One is, how come they could accumulate so much arms and weapons and such amount for such a major attack without Israel being knowledgeable about it, in spite of having one of the most sophisticated defense systems?
Very good question.
And the second thing is, immediately after this event, surprisingly, China was supporting the Palestinians. And I have a feeling whether they had a hand in inciting this war so as to, distract the people from the horrible conditions that are happening, things that are happening in China and the falling economy.
Well, China, there's a lot of players involved. Everybody's a proxy of somebody, it seems. And sometimes there's shared custody. So you could say like Hamas is shared custody between Iran and Turkey and Qatar. And then you could say, well, Iran is kind of under the custody of China. Maybe. Or to some extent, even America seems to keep on helping Iran. It's kind of hard to, they pretend like they're enemies, but there's something that's weird's been going on with America and them for a while.
Right.
For decades. And so I think these great powers play balancing games. They support opposing sides to try to keep them in check. And so they periodically tilt towards one or the other with weapons or with logistics or propaganda. And we are old enough to have lived through the Cold War and afterwards, and how alliances have changed since then. And so we seem to be in another one of those periods where it's a turmoil. And I noticed China criticized Iran recently, like today or yesterday, in a way to tell them to get the Houthis to behave. Basically, because China doesn't want a disruption to world trade. It hurts them. But yet, so you can kind of tell that these are people they've been sponsoring, but they've gotten out of control. America, of course, feels Israel's out of control. So, maybe we're looking at China versus America largely. And then you got like in there Russia and, other significant, India, Iran, Turkey. There's, the BRICS in general trying to form, and Europe has played its part in all of this. I mean, the big scandal is now over the UN Relief and Works Administration, which only deals with Palestinian refugees. And it's been just uncovered that they had like a dozen that actually participated in the massacre on October 7th.
Oh.
Now, that's a tiny number out of the total number of UNRWA employees in Gaza, which is like 12,000. But here's where it gets uglier and uglier. This investigation showed that 10% of UNRWA employees are members of terrorist groups, either Islamic Jihad or Hamas or whichever ones. And then it gets uglier still. 50% have family members that are members of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. This is the UN group that's responsible for all the humanitarian stuff. So it's almost like the government of Gaza is really this UN agency, and this UN agency is very tightly socially integrated with the Islamists. And that's not a secret. The people who have said, oh, Israel will never win because you can't just kill Hamas. Now, then they'll flip around and say, well, if you say everybody's Hamas, then you're being, collective punishment. So it's like, which is it? It's so deeply embedded that you can never get rid of it. And polls would seem to show that even after they've had their whole city leveled, that still 65% support the massacre. Not as bad as the West Bank, which is like 98% support the massacre, which I don't know how we're going to deal with that. The West Bank is even scarier. That's much scarier of how we're going to deal with that situation. And each one, it's like playing a video game. Each new level is a new level of fear and violence and destruction and nightmares, and I'm sure late night sobbing for me, just wishing that it didn't have to be this way, and not seeing any other way out of it, and certainly nothing I'm able to do about it.
I don't think there's a way out of it. I don't think there is a way out of it. And there is probably a bigger civilizational war coming. I mean, do you think it?
No, I feel it's inevitable, and I maybe it's delusional, but I tend to think our side will win. But that could be delusional. There's no guarantee of anything in life, and certainly there's no guarantee I'll even be alive tomorrow to know who won. And it's not a game. It's not some sports game where you just wear uniforms and cheer them on. This is real stuff. And it has real impact on things beyond the combatants directly involved. Really the question people have to start to ask is, how does this matter? I think maybe we need to cut to that, and that becomes those ugly questions about Islamic law, about Sharia. there's lots of systems in the world, all kinds of laws, cultures, rules. Every society has them. Is there one right way? Probably not. Is one way better than all the others? Probably not. But they exist. Now, the Sharia perspective is rather exclusivist and saying it's either our way or no way. Now, liberal democracy tries to carve out space for ethnic autonomy and religious freedom and things like that. And I'm partial to that. Of course, I was born in it. That's the culture I was raised in, and I think it's a pretty good culture. This other one, if I had to adapt, I would. I mean, obviously, we adapt if we have no control. In the end, you have to adapt to whatever you can't control. If I could make a difference, I'd much rather see a liberal world order survive. I don't know if it will. I don't know how it will get warped. We're always changed by whatever we fight against. And no matter what, that fight itself transforms you. And you may not like the monster you become afterwards. So I always take to heart that question, that Nietzsche, warned everybody, don't keep on staring into the abyss searching for monsters lest you become one. And but at the same time, if something really matters and your participation in it matters, it's hard to know. We now have such an easy time on social media of expressing ourselves and arguing with everybody. And does it matter? I don't know. Do opinions get changed much on social media? I don't know. Some issues probably yes, some issues probably no. Maybe it's just a matter of degree and everybody's fighting for the undecided, or those who are not firmly committed, in which case is the information war worth it? Is it, because we certainly, I know I have, I've wrecked friendships. I've cut off people who I just don't want to hear their point of view. The people who are telling me that, basically you Jews had it coming, which is pretty much what these friends that would write to me, I say, what do you expect? You guys had it coming. And I'm like, wow, if that's your response, I don't think I need you as a friend.
Yeah.
I'm going through trauma right now. I have relatives that are, dealing with serious shit in Israel. I have family there. And even if I didn't, you would think they'd be a little sensitive as alleged friends. And, but no, the first reaction was you had it coming instead of, oh, I hope your family's okay. How are you holding up? I've heard a horrible thing happened. No, their first response was, look, you had it coming. And
how could people be so insensitive?
So my response is just go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're fortunate, I won't block you. And if you just shut the fuck up right now, then I won't block you. But at the same time, it's really sad. All of our years of friendship, you're willing to flush down the toilet. And I guess our friendship really meant nothing to you. In the end, my person is ultimately guilty. I'm guilty for being a Jew. And if anything bad happens to my people, we deserve it. So obviously we didn't really have that great a friendship. You really held some really deeply negative views. I'm not going to, call everybody a racist or an anti-Semite. I call it Judeophobia. I've inverted that. I'm not. They like to accuse people of having Islamophobia. I think the world has Judeophobia in a very serious way, and people are deeply afraid of us. And now, after we've leveled Gaza, they have good reason to be afraid. They certainly have seen evidence of when you piss us off, we will go crazy and not leave anything standing that can be used against us. Now, to your question, which is important, about the failure of Israeli intelligence, I think they did not take seriously the degree to which all the important stuff was happening underground. in these tunnels. And even when they knew about the tunnels, or thought they knew, they thought there was like 100 miles of tunnels, and it turns out to be 500 miles of tunnels. And so it's like a whole city is under the cities. And these guys were smart enough to go off of digital communications. So they did everything with analog. And since they were smuggling in materials via Egypt, they were able to bring in all this cement and high-grade steel and everything else to build their city underground. So that's one part of it. They were able to proceed quietly. They gave the Israelis the story that they really just wanted to focus on their own stuff. And the Israelis were willing to believe that. Because I think they just didn't want to face just how ugly this all is. And also we're overly reliant on technology. And this has happened with the Iron Dome missile defense. It's made, and all the fallout shelters, the bomb shelters. Every Israeli family, every street has bomb shelters. So everybody's got apps, and they're warned if a missile is coming, and if it's headed towards them, and they run to the shelters. And so they get used to it. It's like part of life in Israel is just keep on running to the bomb shelter, and they've been doing that for decades. So they just kind of got numb, I think, to it. All right, another rocket, run to the bomb shelter. And the Iron Dome is going to save us. It'll knock it out of the sky. And it usually does. At great expense, by the way. Incredible expense. It's a very asymmetrically untenable strategy. It costs like millions of dollars to shoot out of the sky a rocket that costs like $400 to make.
Right.
So it's definitely not the fear with fighting with Hezbollah is that they have 150,000 rockets. Hamas only had like 10, 20,000. So this next step up in the game is going to be crazy. And they have much better rockets, more precise, blah, blah, blah. So
it has something.
I think self-deception has been a big part of it. I think we didn't want to believe that we had such an ugly situation. It's hard to be happy every day living in that fear. I think underestimating the enemy, huge mistake. Nobody should underestimate their enemy. It's very foolish. You should focus on studying your enemy as much as studying yourself. And that's perhaps in the end what has been the undoing for the Muslims is they don't really understand their enemy. They don't understand the Jews. And I think that's their downfall is they don't, I'll give Sinwar credit. Yahya Sinwar learned Hebrew and he speaks it fluently, I've heard. So I give him credit, but very few Arab leaders speak Hebrew, which is interesting because Jews, because they come from Arab countries and Iranian and Turkish and everywhere, Jews speak everybody's languages. And you wonder why the Mossad is so effective at penetrating all over the world and doing stuff. It's because the Jews come from everywhere. And they speak Arabic fluently. They speak Persian fluently. And but the Muslims look down at us. We're dhimmis. Dhimmi is their word for second class.
So, we are kafir, dhimmi, same thing. Right. So, thing is...
So that's their weakness. Their weakness is when they look down at us, they don't see us for who we are. Not, however imperfect we may be. But, we have our advantages. They see us as weak. They see us as fearing death, loving life too much, versus them who love death and actually sounds like they fear life. And so they're the inverse of us. And they think because we fear death so much that we won't fight. And that's their judgment. And I don't know if that's helped them to believe that. Maybe it inspires them.
Could it be just a thought? Because, when any intelligence agency assesses the strength of another agency, it has a expectation of capability and expectation of intelligence on the other side. Right. Could it be that there is a new, fresh intelligence or technological capability that has changed, or allowed this to happen? I mean, that is why I brought the angle of the Chinese, because Turkey was with Hamas from the very beginning or for a very long time. But China seems to be like the new entrant. And then immediately after the attack, they actually supported the Hamas, which was very surprising, and opposed the Israeli countermeasures.
Well, Israel and China were, they've been doing all kinds of business deals before all this. And then America was trying to dissuade Israel from doing any further deals with China because Israel handles so much very sensitive intel and military stuff. So the closer Israel collaborates with China, the more potential China getting access to secrets about the U.S. So the U.S. has really scolded Israel for getting too close to China. Now, what would China do to help the Jews more? Because I'm always asking myself when I'm frustrated that America's not letting us do something or whatever. I'm like, well, is Russia going to let us do more? Is China going to let us do more? What would be the deal if we worked with them too? Is there any reason why we don't have to exclusively work with America? Why not? So that's why I obviously have been a proponent for decades that Israel's natural ally is India, and that we are the civilizations that inevitably will have to work together, maybe even against Europe, maybe even against America and China and everywhere. It could be that our civilizations end up forming a new bloc all by itself. An Israeli-Indian bloc. Wouldn't surprise me. And maybe even including the African Christians. I mean, there's an affinity perhaps even with the Vietnamese in Southeast Asia, and so that's what I envisioned happening. And I would confront Jewish people on Twitter about alliances, and I'm like, if you're noticing America kind of is schizophrenic. And they have a balanced approach to Qatar and us, Turkey and us. So, we're part of their balancing act. Right. And look, they're willing to do deals with Iran. So, maybe we should be looking for our balancing against America, not against, but can we find a partner to work with that shares the same interests as us? And I kept on, whenever I'd look at all the possible allies on the map, it just kept on jumping out to me that India is the one that makes the most sense. And from a historical perspective, from values, from language, we share, at least we all can speak English. And it surprised the Jewish community when I pushed this forward. And they're like, really, India? Like, well, think about it. I look at my Hebrew school classmates at synagogue. Every single one of them married Asian women, right? I mean, and I ended up, mainly dating. Well, I dated Asian and Black women, all different colors, but generally they all married Asian women, and several married Indians. And then I noticed Israeli soldiers often took their vacations in India. Yeah. Or their year off between high school and military service, or their years after military service. I'm like, we must be building up linkages there, if not some secret babies. But And in general, there's like a big, what I call them Jubus, Jewish Buddhists. And as we know, Buddhism and Hinduism all come from the same root. And so this Jewish Buddhist dynamic is real. It's very real, philosophically, organizationally. It's a serious thing. You even can notice it in. Anyways, I could go on and on about this. So when I raised it to people, they're like, "Wow, I never thought of that. I hadn't noticed it." And I'm like, "Well, that's what happens when you let yourself be in a scarcity mentality. You need to, I know it's scary times, but have hope and expectations that we have friends, and then open your eyes to who might be your friends. And maybe you have friends you never noticed, and admirers you never noticed. You're so focused on those who hate you, you're ignoring those who love you, or at least who are curious."
Right.
Or, so that's what I became, outspoken about, that this is the time to have an abundant heart and not just focus on who hates us, but to see who admires or appreciates, or at least sympathizes with our situation. They don't have to agree with us on everything. God, I think it'd be a boring world if we all agreed. And is every argument to search for a soulmate? I mean, it's in which case it's just narcissism. We're looking just to argue until we find our own face in the mirror. It's just kind of ridiculous. Are you trying to get to truth, or are you just trying to feel right? And that's an important question, I think, for all of us in everything we do. Are we trying to get to truth, or are we just trying to feel good? And it's in these times brings it all to a head. And so your question, I know you want to keep on going back to, has something changed technologically? Did China help them? I think what we did to ourselves was the biggest. We were inviting Gazans into our homes. The kibbutz people invited the Gazans to work there. I know my AI company, we employed 2 Gazans. The Israeli government gave us a grant so we could work with them in data science. And I could feel their hatred every single phone call. Their tone and energy was just filled with contempt and resentment. But me and my Jewish business partner said, all right, let's give them a shot. Maybe this is a way to build bridges. And obviously we ended up educating 2 Gazans in data science a little bit, not for very long before the war opened. But evidently these places were mapped out by Gazan workers. And so this gets actually to the core of the misconception of what we did wrong. What we've done wrong was to believe that it was all about economics, and that somehow we could buy them off with jobs, with nice buildings, right? The hope was that Gaza would be the next Singapore, and that was the plan, that it would be this amazing place, tourist destination and logistics, and that was the purpose behind allowing all this buildup, and then giving people jobs in the hope if they had jobs and less to spare, then they wouldn't become terrorists. And instead, they just viewed it as they should, I guess, as that we were trying to bribe them into not hating us. And yet it's kind of foundational for them to hate us and want us off of land that Muslim feet had ever declared to be for Islam, since that erases our history. And so our history means nothing, and therefore they resent that we're on land that they took over. And how dare we be on land that Arabs and Muslims had conquered? And because for them that's legit.
But it
and
was
then our
original land to begin with. The land was given.
Exactly. So that's when you confront them with it, with the fact that Allah is a Zionist, their heads explode. and say, look, I read the Quran too, buddy. Allah is a Zionist. He acknowledges that this is the land that was promised by God to the Jewish people. It's in the Torah, it's in the New Testament for Christians, and it's in the Quran for Muslims. Everybody knows where the Jews came from.
Right.
Not only that, all three of them agree that one day the Jews will return. Well, guess what? We've returned.
Right.
So, not a surprise, foreseen by your prophets and everybody, that they knew the return of the Judai was going to happen. And so this is the return of the Judai. And, like I'm using Star Wars cutesy terms here. Instead of Jedi, we're the Judai. So,
when do you see this war ending? I mean, how many months, or do you think it can escalate into something bigger? This is a very serious time.
Well, the Iranian forces, or I don't know if it was Iran itself or proxies from Iraq. Anyways, somebody affiliated with Iran attacked a U.S. base in Jordan yesterday. And this evidently crossed a pretty big red line. And the U.S. is now threatening a direct response on Iran. So, I don't know. I kind of thought we're going to be pushed into a ceasefire to get the hostages out for Gaza. And with the genocide charge from the International Court of Justice hanging over our head, now we got to make sure we're behaving every day. And how long can a war go on fought like that? And at the same time, it's kind of a race. Can they get Khan Yunis to whatever level of tunnel discovery and weapons confiscation and killing of Hamas and other terrorists to enough point, and then the next city, which is the final showdown, is Rafah, which is on the border with Egypt, and that's the city that probably has the vastest tunnel network running under it from Egypt to Gaza, because apparently some Egyptian police or whoever must have been in on the smuggling, either looking the other way or getting paid. And the Muslim Brotherhood has a big presence in Egypt, and the government officially hates them, but I'm sure it's not cut and dry, that there must be people who play both sides, like everywhere. I always point out to Israelis and Jews, it's like, look, I would not be surprised if our people even helped them too. In fact, we know we did, because we gave them jobs, and they were able to map out everything because we gave them jobs.
Right.
So, did we consciously know it would lead to us getting killed? No. But did we facilitate it inadvertently, naively? Yes. Greedily even. I imagine people made extra bucks selling sophisticated stuff to Muslims in Gaza through third parties. It wouldn't surprise me. So I always say, look, we probably have people on our side that have been helping them, and we actually know that it is true that there are many Jews who hate Israel that are very loud. They're a small percentage, but they exist. And I was one of them when I was younger. So it's like, realize we have a security leak amongst ourselves, and it's because of a lack of solidarity, and it gets to deep questions of who are we, right? And Jews are trying to sort that out, because we're suddenly faced with how many different flavors of Jews there are. And so that's a big question. Who are we? What do we actually believe in, and what do we stand for? And so what I'm proud to see among the young Jews in the military is how, unlike the older people who were fighting on the street months before about judicial reform and secular versus religious and socialist versus libertarian and globalist versus nationalist, suddenly now everybody is saying no divisions and everybody's embracing the other side. So the ones who are atheists, they're actually now wearing religious stuff in the tanks.
Beautiful.
And they're praying. Isn't that crazy? It's incredible. It's like, poof, it changed overnight. Suddenly it's like, now we yell at each other for yelling at each other. It's like, stop the divisions. Do you want us to die? We can't be divided.
Remind me of a saying, there aren't no atheists in a foxhole. You know, there aren't no atheists.
Definitely true. I think that's what we've seen. And then the religious. It turns out the religious Zionists make up by far, massively overrepresented the casualties. 45% of all the Jews killed are religious Zionists. And yet they had been accused of not wanting to serve. And so they've joined, and they've actually died in larger numbers than everybody else. Interesting, huh? So the secular and atheists need to, eat some crow over that. And although, again, it's not about getting even with people. And like I said, I've been one of them. So we all need to be more humble and more tolerant where we can be. And what I encourage us to do is to treasure deeply any Muslim that is pro-Israel. They are rare, they are courageous, and I sure don't want to see any of them get killed. If there's any Muslim or Gazan that loves Israel, oh God, I pray for them. And I think that's the right orientation. I mean, because a very high percentage of the population hates us, and there's just nothing we can do about it. Certainly not in a short time. It could take 30 years before the toxins run out of this. It could take longer, but at least let's treasure whoever loves us. And if we can find out who they are, my God, that would be awesome. Because I've been told, I made a lot of friends on Twitter who were Muslim. So not just people who wanted to kill me. There were people actually really sincere, deep intellectuals. They had gone through the same schooling I had of national liberation and Marxism and, the whole pathway. And they're brilliant. And you'll see them sometimes commenting on television, like Hussein Abdul Hussein. I consider him a good friend. And there's Hussein Abdul Abu Bakr. And these guys are Iraqi and Lebanese, and they're thoughtful dudes, and I respect them tremendously. And then there's this young guy named Timur. Anyways, he lives in Jaffa, and he openly converted to Judaism. Well, not at first. It came out, and he got found out that he had converted. And so I asked him what percentage did he think of Palestinians who are either Israeli citizens or Gazans or West Bankers, which percentage of them have a friendly space in their heart towards the Jewish people. And I was hoping to hear a much larger number than he told me. And he thought maybe 7. Okay. He says, if you want to dream hard. Yeah, he first started off with 1 or 2 or 3. He says, but, if you want to be really optimistic, there's some places where it's strong. But, I wouldn't count on more than 7 if you want to do mathematics based on averages across all these areas. And I was crestfallen when he told me that. And he says, "Look, I'm out here every day. I know I can see, who's on my side and who isn't." And Alkin, that was his name, Timur Alkin. Anyways, I hope he's still alive. Hope they haven't killed him, because it takes a lot of guts to take such an unpopular stand as being friendly towards the Jewish people, if you live in a Muslim context. And some of them are very thoughtful people. They have really thought through a lot of stuff. In some ways, they know more about Judaism than I do. The things that they can, and they've learned Hebrew fluently, and they can debate in Arabic and in Hebrew, all of these different things. And it's like, wow, these got smart dudes. They're smarter than me. And that's been a nice discovery. And it's not like I expect everybody has to love us or become us. That's just what that people are who they are, whoever they want to be. I'm not trying to on some proselytizing crusade. Although I did put out the idea that wouldn't it be nice if somehow we had 1,000 Zionists army, and as I went, we got a lot of Jews around the world, at least that we could call Jews, that they're long lost descendants of Jews who were forced converts. Like Latin America, they say 1 out of 4 people have Jewish blood.
Oh.
And so that's 150 million.
Right.
And then how many people in North Africa have Jewish blood? Probably an enormous percentage, right? I mean, all across the Maghreb and the Arabian Peninsula and the Fertile Crescent, Jews have been everywhere. And how many Europeans have Jewish blood? Lots. Russians. As we've discovered, there's even Indians with Jewish blood.
Yeah.
So it's like, by blood, obviously Jewish law doesn't extend to infinity, but maybe we should at least not, maybe, we don't need to, push, but at least let people know the door is open. Anybody's invited. Maybe we haven't made that clear. Maybe we come off too exclusive, and we should at least say, hey, if you want to join us, we are open to having more people join our tribe. We're not trying to exclude anybody. I mean, it's you're welcome to become a Jew. It's like, it's not a genetics thing.
On that note, after this war broke out, Israeli government reached out to India for workers, because I think there was a pushback of the workers from Gaza, and so they are actually recruiting now in Haryana region for workers to go to Israel, for the basic services and other stuff. So there is a massive recruitment going on as we speak.
Interesting. Well, they're going to mix our people together no matter what. Right. It has to. And you guys are the most populous country on the planet.
Yeah.
And the most diverse. And you guys are like a planet all by yourselves. And
yeah.
And we're like the tiniest people in the world. I mean, 15 million? I mean, we are what? 1/1000th of the size of India? So it's an interesting combo. This little speck of dust with this giant planet, and hopefully we can make magic happen. The little tiny dust of the Jews with this planet India.
But there is a lot of talent in Israel. There is a lot of Jewish talent around the world. So many Nobel laureates are Jewish, most of them.
Well, I wish it was most, but it's like 20%. For women, it's 50%. Okay. But considering Jews are less than 0.2%, we punch 100 times our weight for Nobels. So, and our women are even smarter than we are. They punch 250 times their weight for Nobel Prizes. So it's like the Jewish women make the Jewish men seem stupid.
Let's end to that note. Wish you guys the glorious success in the coming days. This is a war that needs to end. And
well, thank you so much for the support. It's been a very lonely time for me personally. I'm here in Africa, and I think though a lot of Jews feel very lonely right now. A lot of us have lost our friends. Either we've had to just close off communication because it's too painful to have people yell at you and say you had it coming, and so it's like, wow, these were my friends, and you'd end up realizing you have a lot fewer friends than you thought, and so yeah, the support from India and sending all those warships to protect the trade, man.
We need to work together. We will work together.
You guys did more for us than any country.
Thank you, my friend, and wish you a great